Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Abdullah Kamil, and in the last episode we talked about how to structure your data the flat way, which is basically designing your data similar to a database table. Okay, and the benefit of that, of course, if you watch the last video or the last episode, let's say, the benefit of that is the ability to produce reports out of it later on using pivot tables and pivot charts, and this is what we're after basically. In this episode we're going to do that in Excel and complete the design of our structured table. And I urge you to watch the previous episode before watching this one to get the full benefit. Okay, so the data that we have here represents all the calls received from the data from the call center that we have discussed in the last episode. And so we have a total of almost 800 calls here. And so if you look from call ID to end time of the call, all of these columns here represents the basic flat data, basically the data that you will input manually. Okay, and after that, from name column to problem solved, these are your categorial columns, and those will be selected from a drop-down menu because they are limited to a certain selection. So all of these will not be entered manually, they will be selected from a drop-down menu. So what is left now is defining our calculated columns, okay, or calculated fields, as you will hear in most of the time. Okay, so the first step to do that is to define your table here or your range at the moment. The Excel looks at your data at the moment as a range. Okay, so you need to define it in Excel as a table. You need to tell Excel this is a structured table which is very similar to a database table. How you can do that is to go to the Home tab, and from there you go to something called Format as Table. And this is really one of the most important features in Excel, and it's really a time saver. So clicking on the icon here, you can see multiple colors here. Just select any one of them that you like. Once you select it, it will give you a hint of your data range. Okay, if you agree that this is your data range, then you are okay. And the other thing, you need to check if your table has headers or not. In our case here, we do have headers, so we keep it checked and we hit OK. And as you can see, the table is formatted now as a table, and Excel now looks at it as a table. Okay, and how you can find out is basically you get a new toolbar now called Table Design. And clicking on that table design, it will give you this toolbar options that you see here. And one of the most important things, now you can name your table. And I urge you always to put a meaningful name. So we're gonna give it a meaningful name here. We're gonna call it calls. All right. So our table now is named calls, and we're gonna start adding columns to our structured table. To do that, just come here at the end of the table to the right and add your new column. So as we said, we're gonna add our calculated fields. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna calculate here is duration of the call. All right, and something to remember always, in our example here, each row represents one call. And also you will see the data move sometimes, like date and start and end here, because they are randomized. So I always randomize the numbers so you can see the data moving, and get a feel for it. Okay, so to calculate duration, basically subtract the end time of the call minus the start time of the call. But wait, you see something new now. Excel no longer references the cell as E3 minus D3. And why is that? Because now you are in a table. So what it's going to give you is it's going to give you a new way to look at it. So it's give you at end between square brackets minus at start between square brackets. So let's decipher that. The at here means that you are selecting the end column a column called end in the same row that you are writing your formula now. So basically at end between square brackets, what it means is basically the end column in the same row where we are writing the function. So once you hit enter now, you can see you didn't need to drag the formula to the end of the table. It was applied to the whole table at once. And why? Because the at will always reference the current row. And with complicated and complex functions, this is really helpful because you will always know it's going to give you a description of what columns you are using in your function, and it's really helpful when the functions start growing. All right, so we calculated the duration, but it's not displayed in the right format that we want. So as we discussed before, the duration need to have the duration format applied to it. So to do that, you need to select the whole column, and to do that you come here at the end at the top of the column, and you see a black arrow now facing down, and that will allow you to select all the column but without the header. And this is what you want to apply the format to the column, not the column header. And then you go to cell format, and from the cell format just go to custom and delete everything you see there, and between square brackets just put HH for the hour, or maybe we need to put between square brackets the minutes, because these calls will not be more than an hour most of the time. And then we have the seconds there. So when you put the minutes between square brackets, basically it will calculate the elapsed minute. Okay, so hitting OK here, now it's going to give you the duration for each call in minutes and seconds. And as you can see here, this call actually lasted for 69 minutes. So the duration is done with. The next thing we're going to calculate here is going to be the month. So to get the month, basically we use a function called text. And the value for the text function is going to be the date. And the format that we're going to use here is basically the 3-month abbreviation, the 3-letter abbreviation for the month. Now, the month name is basically done with, and the other thing we're gonna add is the week number. So we're gonna first calculate the week number. The serial number is gonna be our date, and as you can see here, all our function now will reference the current row, and this is really helpful. And the return type, let's say our week begins on Monday. Okay, the next thing we're going to calculate here is quarter. So we'd like to know on what quarter this call was received. So to do that, there is no function or there is no format for quarter like the one you found for month. Or maybe before that, let's reformat the week number here to something more meaningful. So we can add between quotation mark WK, and we glue it to the week number using the ampersand. And now it looks a bit better, I guess, because it's gonna look, that's how it's gonna show in the reports later on. For quarter, as we said, to calculate the quarter, there is no, like the month, there's no abbreviation for, if you put Q here, it's not going to give you anything. To go around that is to first to calculate the month numbers. To do that, you use month function. So the month functions ask for the serial number, which is the date of the call, and as you can see here now, it's going to give you the month number. Now we go back to the function here and we divide it by 3 because each quarter has 3 months in it. Okay, and as you can see, we start getting weird numbers here, basically the wrong format. So we just change the format back to general. So as you can see here, it's still not representative of quarters. So to fix that is to round up the number to the nearest integer. So we round this up to the nearest integer, which is basically a number of digits. Here you put 0. Okay, so this is the quarter number now, and to make sure, you can see that we have 1, 3, 4. We don't have anything in Q2. Okay, and of course the number alone will not look good in reports. So what we can do, we can add abbreviation to it called QTR dash, and then close the quotation mark because it's a text, and glue it to the rest of the function using the ampersand. And you can do that, anywhere in the function. So now we get the quarter for each call defined. There's also something that sometimes is needed, is to find out whether the call came in the morning or in the afternoon. So we can define or classify each call as AM or PM. So to do that, we're gonna add the new column called AM/PM. So to find out at what time the call was received, we're gonna calculate first the hour for the start time of the call. So we click on the start column here in the same row, and we can see here that the hour function is going to give us the hour as a number. And the good thing here, we can use this number now in any mathematical calculation. Okay, so we can check this against noon. So if it's bigger than, if the hour is bigger than 12, is it's PM. If it's less than 12, is AM. Okay, so let's add an if function here. So if the hour of the call received time was bigger than or equal to 12, then this is PM. And if it's not, it's gonna be AM basically. And now each call that we have here is classified as AM or PM, and we can use that in our reports later on to get statistics on some of this stuff. Okay, so the last, I think our table looks good at the moment, and there's one thing left, is to create our menus. Okay, so I'm gonna show it for one specific column here, and the rest is just basically the same procedure. So to create a drop-down list for the column name, we need to first create a master list. Okay, so to come up with a master list, we basically copy the whole column and we go to a new sheet here and we paste it as values. And once we paste it as values, we're gonna define it as a table. So we format it as a table, and we don't have headers now, so we leave it the way it is. So it's gonna suggest that the column is called column 1. We change that to name. Okay, now we know that the column is called name, and the table now is called table 3. We're gonna change that and we're gonna call it names. So we have a table called names with a column called name. Now this is not a master list yet because we have duplicates. So to remove the duplicates, click in the column and make sure you are under table design tab and go to remove duplicates. Click on it and it's going to tell you that the column name, this is where we're going to apply the remove duplicate. And if you have multiple columns, it will give you the option to delete the duplicate when it's duplicate in 2 columns. So we're going to click OK. So 731 duplicates found, 8 unique values remain. So now we have a master list for our employee name. Okay, and we're gonna call this sheet gen, which is basically general information, or you can use whatever goes with you. All right, so now I would like to have a drop-down menu whenever I click on any name here and give me the option to change it. So to do that is you need to select the whole column as we did before. Wait until you see a black arrow facing down and click. So with the column selected now, we go to Data tab, and then we go to Data Validation. And in the data validation, the default is to allow any value in the list. We're going to change that, and we're going to allow only a list. Now it's going to tell you what's your source for the list. Now what people normally do, they just click here, they go to the list and they select it. That will not be a good practice, because whenever you add new names to your column here, you need to go back in the data validation and expand the range. So the way to make it always automatic, whenever you add the new names, it will appear here in the drop down menu, is basically to do it this way. So you go to data validation and you go to list, and in the source you use a function called indirect. So the indirect function, what's gonna do is gonna be your middleman basically between you and Excel. So the middleman here is gonna ask Excel, do you have what is the indirect function using? So we're gonna use between quotation marks the table name, which called names, and then square brackets to recognize the column name. Okay, and close the quotation marks. So what is this indirect function now does is basically go into Excel and ask Excel, do you have something that looks like this? And Excel will look and will find a table called names with a column called name. So once you hit OK, you now see that whenever you click on any of the names here, you get the drop down menu, and when you click on it, you will get all your names available. And to test the feature that I told you about with adding new names, let's add another name here and call him Adel. Okay, so we added the new name. Normally it will not appear in the drop down menu, but because we're using indirect function referencing this table name and this column, it will appear. And when you hit the drop down menu here, you see the new name that we defined is added. Okay, so we're good. So now what if your manager wants to classify each call by department to get some statistics by department? So to do that is to go to the gen here, and we go to the same name, and we can define departments for each employee. So we can add another column here called department, and we can do department A, department C, department A, department B, and we can just basically copy the same thing till the end. Alright, so we defined the department for each of our employees here, and the next step is to go back here and add a new column. So we click anywhere, just one cell where you want to create your new column. Right click on it, go to insert, and it's going to give you the option to insert table columns to the left. And once you add it here, you can see that it inherited the drop down menu from the name column. I don't know why Excel's doing that, but we'll live with it. So we now have a drop down menu where we don't need it. So to remove it, go at the top here, select the whole column, go to data validation, and basically clear all, and hit OK. And now we're going to name this column department. Alright, so to get the department now for each of these calls, we're going to use the name of the employee, and we're going to use, you guessed it, VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP is going to use a unique name, which is going to be the employee name, and it's going to go to a table array. And the good thing now The table array is basically the table where we defined the employee name, so we can call it. So we can start writing names, and immediately when you start writing in A, you will get the option to select a table called names, and this is what we're after. So the good thing here now, because we reference the table by name, it will always give you the table in its entirety. It doesn't matter how big it grows, it will always return, you know, the whole table. And this is really important because in the past you need to go every time into the lookup function and change the range. And this is why formatting your data as table is very useful. And then it's going to ask you for the column index number. We know that the department is the second column in the data, in the names table. So we're going to write 2. And then, of course, we need exact match. If you're new to VLOOKUP function, I have a video in the channel that you can check out, or there are a lot of other videos on YouTube that shows you how to use it. Okay, so now we have the department defined for each call, and that will allow us in the future to produce a pivot table using department names. Okay, so you can summarize data using departments. With that, I think our table is ready now to be used to produce reports. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode where we start designing our reports using pivot tables. And we're going to look at basically almost all the features that we have in pivot tables and how to use them. Thank you so much.